Today I will be looking at the disastrous situation that Nicola Sturgeon and Peter Murrell have created. What they did was unethical, a gross breach of trust of their members as well as other independence supporters, and is under criminal investigation. They have been unapologetic and, up to now, seemingly untouchable. As at the date of this blog, Sturgeon still has a month as First Minister. I have two questions. Will she re-sign the party whip if she is interviewed by police? And, if she is not interviewed before the 27th of March, then why not? This very serious state of affairs has consequences not only for Sturgeon and Murrell but also the SNP, the independence movement and the Crown prosecution. Those responsible could face prison. Under the proceeds of crime legislation, the SNP could face asset seizures. As this drags on, the SNP will suffer more and more reputational damage, and will likely lose seats at the next general election. Failure to progress this case, in a timely manner, has brought the Crown Office into disrepute. The only way the Crown Office can restore their reputation is to do what they should have done by now, and that is to ask Sturgeon and Murrell to account for their actions in a court of law. Beyond reasonable doubt is the standard of evidence required to secure a criminal conviction. Did you know that, even before the police formally started investigating allegations of fraud, there was sufficient evidence in the public domain to prove, beyond reasonable doubt, that the ring-fenced appeals were fraudulent? This is the invitation to donate that was sent to members in late 2016, the St Andrew's Day fund-raising appeal.
We don't hold separate accounts. We're under no legal requirement to do that. Our accounts are managed on a cash flow basis.
So on the 3rd of June 2021, with these weasel words.
We don't hold separate accounts. We're under no legal requirement to do that. Our accounts are managed on a cash flow basis.
She admitted there was no ring-fence fund and that they had spent the donations. Her assertion that there was no legal requirement to hold a separate account ignores the fact that we are all required not to commit common law fraud. The essence of fraud is the use of deliberate deception to induce someone to do something they would not otherwise have done. In this case, the deception was the false promise to ring-fence donations. This false promise induced donations that would not otherwise have been made. The police formally started an investigation in July 2021. By May 2022, their investigation was at a point where they wanted to interview people under caution, but the Crown Office were apparently holding them back. It would seem that the Crown Office thought the SNP had a defense, that all spending ultimately supports the aim of independence. This is a ludicrous, illogical, and wholly fallacious argument. If you need further explanation, then read the letter, linked in the description below, I sent in July 2021 to the Lord Advocate and the Solicitor General. In the letter, I also make the case that prosecuting this case is in the public interest. The referendum appeal was widened out to include the public in March 2017.
You can pledge your support for Scotland's referendum at www.ref.scot.
The two appeals I have mentioned were the only appeals explicitly promised to be ring-fenced and for a future referendum campaign. I believe complaints made from donors to these appeals, and only these two appeals, will be the basis of a prosecution. Here is Sturgeon launching the 2019 Household Guide appeal.
From this summer, we aim to get information on Scotland's potential into the hands of every voter. Our plan is to distribute an Independent Scotland, a household guide to every home across the country, all 2.4 million of them.
So clearly not for a referendum campaign. It's the type of appeal that, provided they have done something, they will be able to defend. So, contrary to what the media are reporting, I believe we are talking of around £500,000 for the missing balance sheet reserve. The media are wrong because they are simply using the SNP's figures, but the SNP have added two wholly different appeals together. The reason the SNP did this is that the ring-fenced appeals are a monkey on their back, and if they could have got away with it, they would somehow have written off the ring-fenced donations before an actual referendum. The SNP financials tell you the real reason for the referendum appeals. These are December 2016 year-end figures. They show that they had a £920,000 debt and not the means to pay. An additional problem was that they needed to prepare an 18-month cash flow forecast to show that their accounts could be produced on a going concern basis. Of course, ring-fenced funds should not have been included in the cash flow forecast, but that would not stop them doing so. Sturgeon and Murrell would have been well aware of this impending problem long before the year end. They were facing reputational damage if the SNP defaulted, and there was even the possibility that themselves and members of the NEC could be held liable for unpaid debt. All this is why they planned the 2016 St. Andrew's Day appeal and the 2017 appeal. It was to milk the enthusiasm for another referendum, knowing that this would give the maximum chance of the money they needed. They were originally hoping for a £1 million cash boost, but only got half because the appeal closed early, due to the 2017 general election. However, they got unexpected help in April 2017. Colin and Christine Weir donated £500,000 and loaned a further £100,000. So now we see the 2017 financials. This is the position after the referendum appeals had been closed and all the money spent. As Sturgeon would put it, used for cash flow purposes, but in plain speak, paying for debts that pre-existed before the referendum appeals. How do we know all the donations had been spent? Quite simply, because they only had £7,906 of cash resources at year-end. That is conclusive proof that all £500,000 had been spent, and no referendum fund ever existed. Instead of a fund, the SNP had an off-books debt, an IOU, for £500,000. An IOU that still exists to this day. Now the question of who is to blame. Nicola Sturgeon and Peter Murrell should be held to account because they were the architects and instigators. Colin Beattie, the current treasurer and treasurer at time of these appeals, has questions to answer as he should have been aware that donations were not being ring-fenced and instead spent on party costs. The referendum appeal was based on a premeditated and deliberate lie. Thereafter, the SNP told more lies in the cover-up. They lied to the media that donations were ring-fenced. They emailed donors and lied that the fund existed and could be instantaneously deployed. They have never apologized or expressed regret. What Sturgeon and Murrell did could not have happened in a commercial organization with a proper system of accountability. They would have been sacked for gross misconduct. The SNP lied for years that donations to the referendum fund were ring-fenced. Stuart Campbell's blog, Wings Over Scotland, has exposed many of their lies. Here is one that Murrell made to a donor who was inquiring about the existence of the fund. Please note, the comment is mine and from a dossier I published in 2021. Murrell's claim that there is a fund is a blatant lie. Just days later, in October 2020, Colin Beattie emailed donors, telling the same lie, that there was a £593,000 fund that could be deployed instantaneously. There will be many donors who, as a result of receiving that email, still do not know that the SNP spent all donations and that no fund exists.
I'm not concerned about the party's finances. The finances of the SNP are independently audited. Our accounts are sent to the Electoral Commission in common with other parties and of course published, so there's full scrutiny around that. Money hasn't gone missing. All money goes through the SNP accounts, independently and fully audited.
So here, Sturgeon is arguing that money can't have gone missing because their accounts have been audited. This is disingenuous obfuscation because Sturgeon knows that they are being accused of spending donations that should reside on the balance sheet as a cash reserve, and it is that cash reserve that is missing. The obvious riposte would be to ask her, if the referendum fund is not missing, then where is it? We can only hope that, maybe someday, a journalist will have the wit to ask that question. This lie was in a report to the NEC, and also in their 2020 accounts. The lie being that the Electoral Commission gave advice on how restricted funds can be reported, and more importantly that there is no obligation to report such a reserve on the balance sheet. This clip features Pete Wishart in November 2021, repeating what Sturgeon said, that there is no missing money, and telling the lie that the donations are still available.
There has been obviously a complaint about money that was given to the Scottish National Party, which is still available for an independence campaign from accounts which have been properly accounted for and given to the Electoral Commission.
And then there is this from Mike Russell. It's a crying shame that he is trashing his own reputation by defending these charlatans. A breach of trust and integrity is a resigning matter for others, but not for Sturgeon.
But there are big issues of trust and integrity at stake now, and that's why I do think Boris Johnson should resign.
Would think he should resign his post, and if he doesn't do so, rather than kicking it into the long grass and instructing an inquiry, as the Prime Minister has done this morning, I think the Prime Minister should remove him from office. I regret very much that we were confronted with a situation where one of our newly elected MPs was facing serious allegations.
In 2015, Michelle Thomson withdrew from the SNP whip whilst a police investigation went on into a solicitor that she had used in the course of her business in 2008. From the outset, the police had made clear she was not the focus of their investigation. Despite this, Thomson was not allowed to stand in the 2017 general election. Over the last 20 months, the police have been investigating very serious allegations of fraud, allegations that Sturgeon is accountable for, and that cannot remotely be described as easy for the SNP.
Of course I regret that. It wasn't a situation of my making. It wasn't a situation clearly that I would have chosen to be in. But, I think people would also appreciate that it was not a particularly easy situation for the party to be in either.
If there is a prosecution, it could mean very bad publicity at the time of a general election. A successful prosecution could mean £500,000 of assets seized under proceeds of crime legislation. The SNP need to remove Sturgeon and Murrell from the party. They should also, without quibble, return all donations made to Referendum Appeals, along with an apology. I think if the SNP are seen to do the right thing, their supporters may be open to donating to a distress fund to get them out of financial difficulty. Many questions have been asked about Peter Murrell's £107,000 loan to the SNP. Apparently, Murrell was just helping them get over a cash flow problem that was caused by the expense of the May 2021 Scottish Parliament elections. I believe further questions need to be asked with respect to the vehicle purchases that could amount to over £100,000. The first one would be, the Scottish election and vehicle costs are predictable in a cash flow forecast. Could they not have predicted that the vehicle purchase was unaffordable? I'll explain the vehicle purchase situation in a moment, but first let me explain why the loan is suspicious. The loan was given in June 2021 but was not reported until over a year later, in August 2022. The reason that they gave for the delay was that he initially did not think that there was a reporting obligation. Given his 20 years' experience at the helm of the SNP, this is a ridiculous excuse. An alternative explanation could be that Murrell believed the SNP's finances could improve before the end of the year, he would get repaid and there would be no need to report the loan. Here we see a new category for motor vehicles. As the SNP have not had vehicles before, it is likely that this is for a single vehicle. The value shown is the net book value after depreciation. What we want is the cost of the vehicle, and ordinarily this should be detailed in Note 18. Before looking at Note 18, take a note that the vehicle value plus the office and computer value totals £272,628. Here we see that the office and computer total is £272,628. So, in Note 18, the vehicle has been included with office and computer. It would seem that the vehicle purchase cost has been deliberately hidden inside this overall additions total. However, we can say that the vehicle cost will be well in excess of the £80,632 net book value, and could even be over £100,000. As mentioned earlier, the SNP accounts do not show, as they should do, the purchase cost of the vehicle. So, what was bought, along with when and the cost will shed some light on this matter. The next question is prompted by the fact that the loan was for the specific amount of £107,620. This is unusual as loans are usually for rounded amounts. This implies that the loan or part of the loan is for something he paid for on behalf of the SNP. It also presents the possibility that he purchased something that at the time the SNP could not have funded. Finally, the most serious question of all. Did Peter Murrell lend the SNP money so that he could gain an employee benefit, and is this what we are not supposed to find out? Obviously, if this were to be the case, a lot more questions will follow. Aspects of this are explained in my letter to the Lord Advocate and Solicitor General. See the link in description. I don't think we will get answers to these questions, but if the Crown fail to hold to account all those responsible, then there will be a public outcry. Maybe then, there will be an inquiry, and David Harvey will be asked to explain why the police were held back from progressing their inquiries.